Metal Inferno presents a Forked Tongue production. Slaves to Reality interview. Questions by Grimm. Narration by HPA. Being that you're in a rock band, I must ask, what is your opinion on the current state of rock music? Is rock dead? Rock music is like any other genre of music. It exists in two states. The first state is pop music. In this state, rock has become just another watered-down, marketable version of what it once was. Producers, labels, A&R reps, agents, and managers mold and manipulate musicians into creating a product they can turn around and sell. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the final product does have the same neat meat that real art has. I tend to look at anything extremely popular as designed to be popular, and the consumer who buys it has been programmed to like what they see and hear. The second state is the spirit of rock. This spirit of rock music has always been fun and rebellion. In keeping with that spirit, we always try to have a good time. We encourage our audience to do the same, and we always give a hearty middle finger to anything considered sacred by the masses, including pop rock. Of course, there isn't much room at the top for musicians who really embody the spirit of rock, but the seedy dive bars we play are half of the fun. So, is rock dead? I personally don't think so. On the other hand, pop rock twats are still selling out arenas, and the labels are still worth millions of dollars. On the other, there are still garages around the world full of kids learning their instruments, testing the boundaries, and coming up with new concepts. In either case, the fans are having fun, so rock is very much alive. You might just have to dig a little to find what you're looking for. Next question. You have a unique sound with elements of rock, punks, and metal. What bands or artists have been greatest influence to Slaves to Reality? That's a tough question to answer. Honestly, Chops, Stephen Walker, and I are the two main members, but neither of us tend to think in terms of how we can sound like who or whatever. We just buy the ticket and take the ride. That isn't to say we aren't inspired by other musicians. There just isn't a conscious effort to sound like anyone in particular or to copy what someone else before us has done. Personally, I have an extremely eclectic taste in music, and I tend to prefer individual songs to artists or bands. If I had to point to any artist that influenced how I write, it would probably have to be bands artists like Nick Cave, Death in June, and Nine Inch Nails. I find myself more musically influenced by writers and philosophers than music itself. To that end, I owe pretty much my entire writing process to people like Anton Sandor de Levay, Jack London, Max Stirner, Adam Parfait, Jules Verne, Benjamin de Lacarce, Ragnar Redbeard, Ayn Rand, Friedrich Nietzsche, and others. Of course, we also do a handful of covers of bands like Pennywise, Agent Orange, and Misfits during live shows, so maybe I'm just full of shit. Who knows? Next question. Why was Slave to Reality chosen as the band's name? What meaning is there behind it? We chose Slave to Reality because it's a perfect representation of the ultimate message we want to spread. We're all slaves to our own reality, but we are also largely responsible for creating that reality. Everyone has families, jobs, schools, hobbies, etc., but we all choose those realities and are ultimately responsible for them. In other words, we are all slaves to the world we created. If you don't like your world, then recreate it. Next question. Is Dancing with Skeletons a metaphor, and what was the inspiration behind the EP? Dancing with Skeletons follows the same thought pattern as the band name. The initial image we all had, independently of each other, was of the group of people walking into the dark woods and stumbling across a primal ritual. The only way to partake in this pagan rite was to shed your skin, to expose yourself to what was under all the layers of bullshit and conformity that you had built up through your life, to figuratively shed your skin and dance with the other skeletons who had done the same. We started with a song called Torn. That was co written by a friend of the band who was suffering from the terminal form of cancer. She had her regrets of a life unlived and wanted to express that through music before it was too late. So we turned it into this grungy, dirty exploration of the self, of regret and desire. As we went through this process of creation, a close friend of ours was gunned down in an armed robbery at a liquor store. That got us thinking about the violence inherent in the human experience, and eventually the question of the Second Amendment and the right to own firearms and what that means. That culminated in the quick and the dead. Of course, everything we were dealing with as a band kind of came to a head at that point, and we had to ask ourselves where we stood in the big picture. We had to analyze where we were as individuals and as a band. The song Fire Within came soon after. I drew on my background as both a combat veteran and Satanist to start designing something that would be inspirational and empowering. At this point, the picture we all had envisioned of the skeletal, primal, chaotic ritual crystallized, and we were ended up writing the title track. Then we realized that we were creeping into the territory of an EP, so we started to think about what that meant and what direction we wanted to take. Chops had written a drum track that kind of fit musically with everything else at that point, so we started playing with different melodies and rhythms to see what worked. This was when Art Imitates Life came about, a completely different feel that came up originally during a live rehearsal. It ended up being the single from the EP and, in my opinion, our strongest song to date. Finally, we were left with needing one more song on this piece that Chops, Dangerous Dave, and Orca had written. We had about 3 days before we entered the studio and had to come up with something that had the worst case of writer's block in the days leading up to meeting with our producer and engineer. But my girlfriend told me to write about what I knew, what I was experiencing, and as a result, the day before we entered the studio, I wrote Writer's Block. And I ended up being the second most popular song under Art Imitates Life. After we recorded it, edited, reviewed, and approved of the EP, we realized that had told a story from beginning to end, and exactly the method we intended. We were telling everyone listening to create their own experience, to take responsibility for their lives, and to become slaves to reality of their own creation. Next question. It's been 2 years since the release of your debut EP, Dancing with Skeletons. Can we expect a full-length LP in the near future? Yes, I don't want to give too much away, but Chops and I have been working on a bunch of new music while searching for the right musicians to complement what we are doing. I'm beyond happy to say that we're currently deep in the writing process again, and new STR is on its way to all of our fans. Next question. What's the songwriting process like for Slaves to Reality? As the slaves to our individual realities we are, the songwriting process is as easy or difficult as we make it. Sometimes something happens that kicks us all into the same gear. Other times it's like pulling teeth to express an idea to each other. Currently, I live on the other side of the country from the rest of the band, so that presents a unique set of challenges and opportunities. I have ideas and experiences that lead themselves to new ideas, but it can be difficult to express those to other members and vice versa. Ultimately, we always let a concept of what our message is guide us through the music and lyrical process until we arrive at what we feel is best. It is as chaotic and undefinable as the songs themselves. Next question. What would you like to take this opportunity to send a particular message or give a shout out? Sure. To the dreamers, the weirdos, the outsiders, the accusers, the opposers, the ne'er do wells, and the villains, never stop. Keep challenging the status quo and stoking the black flame within us all. Our message is the same as it's always been. Rise above what you are supposed to be. Be more than you have been told you're capable of. Shed your skin and dance with the skeletons.